Hello and welcome to the only show that cannot bullseye womp rats in their T16 back home, but can hit a deer in their Toyota Camry. I'm Luke.
I'm Max.
And I'm Matt.
And this is Force for Thought. And we're going to need an alt. Hello and welcome back to Force for Thought. Today we are going to be ranking our top 5 favorite lightsaber battles in the galaxy far, far away. We took a lot of time, or at least I did, prepping our answers for this. This is definitely the episode that I had the most prep time for. More than my Andor review, more than my Book of Boba Fett review.
I was going to say, everybody, we've been together for a little bit now, and we all have been anxiously pacing around each other, not wanting to talk off microphone because we just want to talk about the lightsaber battles.
Yeah, I showed up like a half hour ago and just zipped my lips and talked with my eyes until we turned on these microphones.
A lot of sexual tension in the room.
How did you guys, let's just talk highbrow, how did you guys do this ranking? Was it just a gut thing? Did you devise some sort of ranking system? Did you go back and rewatch them?
I did not rewatch them. I went with I thought a lot about it, but I went ultimately, I had a list of 12, and I wanted to go with when I think of Star Wars, what lightsaber battles do I think of? And I wrote those down first, and then I limited it down to what I think is the best and what I think of consistently. And I'm not gonna lie, when we first pitched this idea, when you guys first pitched it, I wasn't I was excited. I like lightsaber battles like anybody, but it's not my favorite go-to thing for Star Wars. But then I really started writing them down, and the more and more I got excited, and I was telling Max a little bit earlier, I did 4 drafts of this. No, that's not the right order. Okay, no, that one is definitely an honorable mention and not in the top 5 or the other way around. So that's how I went about it. But also, Luke, you too, how did you go about it?
I wrote down my top 16 off the rip, and I knew that I wouldn't get a chance to discuss my top 16 lightsaber battles in one episode. Maybe we'll do a part 2, but I took those 16 and I rated them out of 10 in 3 categories: flash, story, and ending.
Flash.
I think that's what makes a good. Those are the 3 factors that make a great lightsaber fight. Because there's, well, I don't want to talk about any in particular, but it's got to be flashy, it's got to be cool, it's got to have good emotion, story elements, and it's got to have a good ending. Because a lot of them just kind of end, and it is a bit lame. So those are the factors I took into account. Of my 16. Only 1 scored under 20, and only 2 or 3 scored under 26.
So you had an actual ranking system?
Yes,
this is
a lot of them were 10s.
Standard.
A lot of them were 10s in a lot of categories.
What's the point?
In order to,
There was no point of him ranking.
Oh no, there's a point. Because but the one tie that I had to break was 2 of them had 10, 10, 10 out of 10. And so I gave one of them an 11 out of 10 in one category.
That is so funny. For context, upstairs when we were just talking, Luke says, and I gave one of them 31. I gave one 31 points. And Max and I are like, what the fuck are you talking about?
What
and now it makes sense that you rank. We didn't have any context that you ranked these.
Mine was purely a gut thing. So there were a couple factors that I kept kind of coming across in my head as I was trying to think of a ranking for them, and kind of similar to yours. My 3 were the emotions behind the emotional stakes behind the fight, the choreography, and the music. I also had included. So those were kind of 3 of the objective criteria that I guess I used, but it was mostly just a gut thing for me.
Yeah.
And I knew we were doing top 5, so I came up with pretty immediately my list of my top 8, and then I kept thinking of more beyond that. I probably thought of maybe a dozen or maybe 15 or so, but I knew as I was thinking of them, I was that one's not going to make my top 5 though. There's really only about 8 that were competitive for my top 5 spot.
I will say I didn't want it to be too surgical with my list making, too objective, so to say. And so I did go back and rewatch all of these fights, and a lot of my bottom half I crossed out and added it to my top half. So a lot of these that are in my top 5 I had originally ranked in the mid to high 20s, but upon rewatching they got a higher spot. So let's just get into it. Max, where'd you get with your number 5 favorite lightsaber fight in Star Wars?
My number 5 favorite Star Wars lightsaber fight comes from the Clone Wars, the final season. It is Ahsoka versus Maul. Matthew, don't look at me like that.
No.
You knew it was coming.
Yeah, it's not. I just assumed most of these are going to be Clone Wars, especially for Luke.
It's the only one from animation for me, actually, in my entire list, not not just my top 5.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is by far one of the best lightsaber duels. Obviously, you get to see Darth Maul, who is one of the best lightsaber duelists. You get to see Ahsoka Tano in her prime use her two lightsabers. I don't want to say double bladed. And there was just a lot of really good storytelling told with it. They did a lot of cool kind of technological advancements where they actually brought back Ray Park to do some mocap for the fight. And if you go back and watch it, you can still see a couple parts where Ray Park's performance shines through, particularly where Darth Maul kind of does that weird like kick thing in the air where it looks like he's trying to double jump.
We always talk about the double jump.
It's so cool.
I never think it's a double jump, but I know exactly what you're talking about. He kicks his leg back to push his arms forward faster because it's the like reaction, or every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if you kick your leg back, you get a further arm forward action.
I swear,
It's physics.
he said that before, and then I swear to God, you've had the exact same explanation in a previous episode.
Damn it.
Because we talk about it all the time because it's so good. That's how good it is. It's one of those things that just sticks with you. It's like a literal split-second moment on screen, but every time I see it, I'm like, kind of like that trailer for that Mission Impossible movie where Henry Cavill cocks his arms.
No way. Are you serious?
He's not about to explain it again. We've talked
No,
about that before.
I know, that's why I'm
He's
saying it.
because
Okay.
we've talked about
I'm
it
like-
before.
We talk
I'm
about
like
it all
back-
the time. That's why I'm saying it. Yes.
You're in a time loop, man.
No, because that's exactly what we mentioned right after the double jump in that.
We talked
previous
about it in
episode.
context of the Darth Maul.
Yes, I'm 90% sure.
No way. No, I'd remember that.
I'm pretty
I'm
sure
gonna
that's
go
what
listen
happened.
to that episode.
I am pretty
Reach out to
sure.
us
It
on
might have
social
been.
media.
It
if
might
you
have
just
been. I don't know,
listened to
but
that episode.
Regardless,
Someone-
that's
Yeah.
my number 5. It's
Okay.
it's a good lightsaber duel.
Someone needs to start a wiki, like a first for thought wiki, so we can keep track of this
That
stuff.
would be so helpful.
And I don't want to do it.
No, that's definitely a fan generated thing. Listener at home, let us know when it's up.
Yes, anybody.
All right, Matt, where are we at number 5 on your list?
Yeah, I was really surprised. I'm not really surprised. All of them made it in my top 5. Again, going through a lot of honorable mentions, and again, kind of thinking about my gut instinct of what makes a great lightsaber battle for me. And like Luke, you mentioned that they just end, and honestly, that doesn't really bother me. I'm glad that you mentioned that though, because I feel like it does probably for a lot of people. But my number 5 is Obi-Wan versus Anakin: Revenge of the Sith. At first I wasn't going to what.
Which Obi-Wan versus Anakin: Revenge of the Sith?
Yeah, the Mustafar.
The Battle of the Heroes? Okay.
Yeah. Why? What is?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not in any of yours. You look so panicked.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what to say about it, but when I think about it, I mean, it has the emotional impact, and it ends very frightening. And we have a I don't know, Ian McGregor as Obi-Wan and Hayden Christensen as Anakin. I think that is the ultimate battle in that movie. I don't know. I don't know much to say about it besides that. When I think about it being 12 years old or 11 years old, seeing it for the first time, it just kind of blew my mind. And especially, we've seen some great lightsaber battles within that trilogy. And it's not even my favorite from that trilogy, but I think being able to, especially being that age, I think a lot of these maybe come from, honestly, looking through, I'm like, yeah, a lot of these in my top come from when I was younger to be like, I like the flashier stuff. And again, not necessarily why I like Star Wars, but yeah, I like Obi-Wan versus Anakin.
I also like that one. There might have been a little
It has to be
mishap with our lists being meshed together. Let's just say I'd give that fight a 10 out of 10 for story and ending, and an 11 out of 10 for Flash.
Damn it.
That is a very flashy fight. I love that fight.
Okay,
and
good.
upon my rewatch, there was another point that moment that I never really connected, but it's so obvious I should have, when Obi-Wan says Anakin, the Chancellor, is evil, and Anakin says, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil, and that's where Obi-Wan gets his whole my point of view shtick, that
Yeah.
he can just say, oh, well, from my point of view. I never made that connection.
Oh, that's really smart. Damn. Also, you when I said my choice and you looked at me weird, I'm just like, I got so much pressure, and I just feel like I
Sorry.
stumbled over my entire thing.
But yes, Anakin Obi-Wan, very, very good fight scene. Coming back to me for my number 5, I went with also Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Dooku, also in Revenge of the Sith.
Yes.
That is a very fast fight. It's very underrated because it's so early.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in like 2005 thinking about where Count Dooku was going to fit into this story, because
Yeah.
I didn't expect him to die so early, but I knew he wasn't going to be in the second half of the movie because it's not
Yeah.
really about him. And so it does have a good shock factor. The ending is awesome with Anakin with his blue and red lightsaber. The choreography is very fast. And I also give a lot of attention to the banter in the middle or around a lightsaber fight, and this one has some of the best, where they're quick cuts where Anakin says, "My powers have doubled since
Yeah.
the last time we met," which in 2005 when that came out before the Clone Wars, you're led to believe that it was 3 years ago in Attack of the Clones when they last met, but after seeing the Clone Wars, you know that they meet several times in the Clone Wars, and so I think that even just adds to it. The Anakin saying, like, "My powers have doubled since the last time we met," and we met like 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Like, that shows Anakin's arrogance and confidence and
Yeah.
his
I think it
exponential
demonstrates
growth.
his growth.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily bad things.
No, yeah.
I mean, because we do talk about that shock factor at the end of that scene, and it is so so nerve wracking.
Yeah.
Especially seeing that as a kid. Like, Star Wars is fun, right? But all of a sudden, it's like it's very dark. Obviously, it's an audibly dark turn. That doesn't make any sense. It literally is such a dark turn that when you're watching that and you're like a kid, you're like, yeah, they're gonna go in the elevators, and all of a sudden they're just like chopping people's heads off. Like at the end of that scene, you're like, oh,
Yes, and so I also gave a lot of attention to how well a lightsaber fight ended. And sometimes, like Obi-Wan and Anakin gets his hand cut off, and Obi-Wan gets cut in the knee when their first battle. And then this time, Anakin decapitates Count Dooku ceremoniously with both lightsabers. Like, that is such an improvement from their first encounter.
that's true. Also, I'm gonna go back. I like lightsaber battles that just kind of end, but I think you're right. Everything in my top 5 does end with a very poignant ending. And now I am worried that the other ones are going to be wrong as well.
We'll find out.
We'll find out because we can't break. We gotta keep rolling with it and just see as it comes up.
We'll be fine. We'll pivot. Max, where did you get your number 4?
My number 4, maybe an unpopular one, but I went with a lightsaber battle, if it could technically be considered that, from the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. It is Vader versus Reva. It is one of my favorite lightsaber battles because of how easily Darth Vader just absolutely throws her aside. Some people might listen to that and they're going to be like, she didn't even hold her own against him. And that's kind of the point. I really like that she was kind of like the villain of the series throughout the entire time. And then when you finally see her compared to Vader, you just see how massive of a presence Vader is and how easily he can handle anyone who tries to challenge him. For the first like half of their fight, he doesn't even draw his own lightsaber. He's just like sidestepping her, and then he eventually steals her lightsaber and like breaks it in half and uses her own lightsaber against her. And I don't even know if their lightsabers even like clash with each other at all.
They do. I rewatched this one. Yeah.
Okay. And then obviously it kind of ends with him stabbing her and she survives. But so I don't know how you give that for an ending, because you might say like, oh, that just kind of ends. But I really like the story beats behind it. Obviously the choreography I thought was really cool. Getting to see Vader act like that was why I gave it my number 4.
For the ending, I gave it an 8 because getting stabbed is cool, but she does survive, which makes it less cool. But the way they intercut it with Anakin stabbing young Reva, and it's like this same thing already happened. That makes it so much cooler. That was such a dark editing choice to intercut that like they did.
It's like getting struck by lightning twice. Like, what are the chances of this?
Yeah, if I was gonna die in Order 66, I would want it to be by Anakin, and then Reva's lucky she got to have it twice.
Oh my god!
Every 8 seconds, someone gets struck by lightning.
Is that true?
That poor person.
It could be
You
you,
walked right
listener.
into it.
Sorry, that was really funny. Max, that's such an interesting choice. I feel like I think out of all of Star Wars, that would be like one of my great honorable mentions. I feel like, and I have one that's similar, like you said, like you're not even sure if they clash lightsabers, and you're talking about Vader doesn't even ignite his saber for a long time. I don't want to get into honorable mentions, obviously, but I kind of have one that's similar in the fact that is basically a one-sided, but it is still, I would consider it a lightsaber battle as well. So we can get into that later on. I don't want to break format.
That's fine. But yes, Anakin and Vader Reva was a very good fight. When I initially ranked it, I gave it a 25 out of 30, which got to number 10, and then I rewatched it and shot it back up to number 7 as like a gut thing, because it was just a badass fight. It's really fun to watch.
I feel better about that pick then. So you had it pretty high up there.
I did.
Good,
Yeah.
Good.
It's good.
Matt, what's your number 4?
So the antithesis, I'd say, of the Revenge of the Sith fight is Rey and Finn versus Kylo Ren in The Force Awakens. Nobody in that time. Okay, just making sure. Yeah, I mean, when I think of, again, when I was building this list, I was thinking about like what I think of, like it is like that visual thing too, and I feel like in that scene is the antithesis of the revenge, because it is so snowy outside. Again, when you see that trailer for Force Awakens, what I think is maybe the best trailer of all
Don't
the
get me
Star Wars
started.
trailers. I feel like it is such a good deception. Now you also see Finn, who is a non-Force user, up until that point, use
Allegedly.
use a lightsaber, but you also have Kylo Ren just like hulking towards him. You get Rey, and then when the saber flies past Kylo Ren into Rey, it's such a great moment, and also just like the visual of the the red and blue against this white snowy background, and then beyond that, you also have this moment where the entire thing is kind of getting destroyed and cracked open, and so you have this, I think, really epic ending lightsaber battle, and it's really hard to also, I think, see Han Solo die and then also be really entertained like 2 minutes later, and somehow they do that.
It's an emotional whiplash, but
Exactly.
it works.
Yeah, I think it does too. And then I just love how the way it ends, and I just, again, for me, this is all about visuals, and then it's able to somehow top a death of like one of our most beloved characters of all time.
Mm-hmm. I am certain that it didn't go down this way creatively when they were making the movie, but I like to tell myself that JJ showed that scene to the executive producers and whomever at Lucasfilm, and they just watched it and scratched their chin like, well, how come Kylo Ren's not like mopping the floor with these idiots that they're not trained? And JJ's like, oh, well, Chewbacca had just shot him like 5 minutes ago. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense then.
With the bowcaster, which they made the whole point about how it was like throwing stormtroopers back
Yes.
100 feet every single time they were shot, and he just takes it.
Yes, narratively, it does make sense, and I don't think that that's any sort of plot hole like other people have said to me before.
I don't fault it for that. I do agree with some of the criticisms surrounding some of the sequel trilogy choreography. I don't think those lightsaber duels are like the best choreographed lightsaber battles that we've ever seen, but I do agree with that, with the storytelling, the emotional stakes and everything, and I do really like the imagery, like you said, the scenery and the snow falling all around them and the reflections of their faces and everything. All the iconography from that battle are superb.
It is so funny. That's like, the choreography is something I think about the least about. Like we talked about a lot of like episodes ago, where it's just like if you're kind of complaining about the choreography, it's like you have bigger problems than in Star Wars versus the choreography. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I guess like prequel trilogy probably has the best choreography in all of Star Wars. But like, again, I don't know. There's something. I was gonna say something else. Oh, the Kylo Ren thing. I do think that in that scene, Kylo Ren he's young and he's cocky, and I think he is toying with them a bit too. I don't think he's just like straight being like, I'm going to have like struggle with this. He does struggle in that battle a bit, especially with Rey, but I do think he's really kind of playing with them throughout that scene.
He tries to riz her up. He tries to become her teacher when they're got their lightsabers interlocked. He says, "You need a teacher. I can do it."
Did you use that correctly?
Oh yeah, as the youngest one here. Yes.
Okay.
I'm basically 17.
Barely.
As the oldest one here, I only know what you're saying because of comedy podcasts that made fun of that phrase once, I've heard.
Do you have anything else for that fight?
No, I feel like I'm stumbling over all of these.
Sorry. All right. My number 4 favorite lightsaber fight in Star Wars is Anakin versus Barriss in the Clone Wars. So this comes at the end of the Wrong Jedi arc at season 5 of the Clone Wars. When Ahsoka is framed for doing the bombing of the Jedi Temple, and Anakin finds out that it's Barriss, and then Barriss pulls out. Anakin has his lightsaber and Barriss's lightsaber, and then Barriss pulls out Asajj Ventress's 2 lightsabers, and they have one-on-one, both wielding 2 lightsabers fight, and it's a very well choreographed, very exciting fight, and there's a lot of unique great moments because. For the banter, Anakin says you should have gotten rid of them, referring to the lightsabers, and then Barriss says, I think they suit me. So you get their motivations and ambitions clear that Barriss like did the bombing and she betrayed Ahsoka and she wants red lightsaber. Like she's going full dark side. She's not misunderstood or anything. Like she is the villain. And the fight is not necessarily close because it's Anakin, and this is like one of the biggest moments in the Clone Wars where you see Anakin's journey closer to the dark side, because that's something that the Clone Wars is praised a lot for, that you see that journey more fluidly than in just the movies. And so in the beginning of the series or in Attack of the Clones, Anakin is like a light side Jedi, kind of struggling with it sometimes. And at the end of this fight, he rips her out of the air and force chokes her 20 yards away into a tree. And it is a very stunning defeat for Barriss. And just visually, it's super cool to see. And narratively, it's super cool for Anakin. Another moment, Barriss runs away into like a Jedi courtyard where Terra Sanube is training the younglings from the that Jedi youngling arc. And for the Clone Wars, which is an anthology series, which we said before when we were ranking our favorite TV shows, I don't really care for the anthology nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really cool to see tie-ins to other story arcs and episodes, and you very rarely do in the Clone Wars. So that was awesome. And then I don't know if we get to count Barriss's speech after Anakin wins and brings her to the trial to vindicate Ahsoka, but that's such a good speech. She says like the Jedi are the ones propagating this war and we should be the ones on trial. And it cuts to Obi-Wan and I forget who, and I just rewatched it. It's either Saesee Tiin or Ki-Adi-Mundi. It would probably be Ki-Adi-Mundi because it's always Ki-Adi-Mundi, but I feel like it was Saesee Tiin. But they both like look down kind of regrettably, and I feel like one of them, like the other one, not Obi-Wan, is thinking like, "Oh, that's so sad. We let Barriss down, and she's fallen so far." And Obi-Wan's like, she's right. We've let ourselves down. We are the enemies, and that's such a great moment. And such a great fight just before it.
I think one of my favorite recurring things about our podcast is Luke's intense love for Kit Fisto combined with his intense dislike of Ki-Adi-Mundi.
I think a lot of our listeners' Luke's love for Kit Fisto is also.
It's just a natural love for Kit Fisto that we all feel.
Yeah. The fact that I still laugh, like on like maybe not a daily basis, but definitely weekly basis. I think about how you commented on somebody's comment on Instagram saying this feels like my natural skin about the mask.
Yeah, when I'm wearing the
mask,
it feels like my natural skin, and this flesh on my face is the real mask.
I read that like not interacting with you and just I don't know, I just died laughing at that.
Max, what do you got for your number 3?
For my number 3, I am sticking with the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show. And I am going with the Obi-Wan versus Vader. Part 2 or part 1, considering how you look at it, was Obi-Wan versus Anakin, Revenge of the Sith, and then Obi-Wan versus Vader in A New Hope. Splitting hairs there. Anyway, it is my third favorite lightsaber battle. I absolutely love the emotional stakes, the music, the climax of just their entire story arc, and how it kind of goes into their story, continuing back with A New Hope is fantastic. When you see him, when you see his eyes and you see Anakin's voice kind of breaking through the Darth Vader voice, it's eerie. It is heartbreaking. It hits me in all the right feels of everything that I go back and rewatch. That is probably the thing that I go back and rewatch the most, honestly, is that fight. I like it a lot. The only thing that I knock it for is the same thing that everyone says, which is like, oh, well, we kind of saw this before in Rebels, right, with Ahsoka versus Darth Vader. And I don't knock it for that just because well, first off, that argument, like, oh, we've seen this before, it kind of like cuts the argument that you sometimes hear from other people who are like, oh, they should like adapt some of their books and comic books into live action more. Yep. And even a lot of Clone Wars fans are like, oh, they should do this in live action. And I'm much more in that camp as opposed to, oh, wham, we've already seen this before. So that doesn't bother me at all. I absolutely love it.
And it's Hayden Christensen, right? So it's like it does pull on that emotional heartstring. I think that is a great moment in Rebels, and I think we're able to see it in live action is great. And also for people that have seen Rebels and Clone Wars and stuff, and having those little moments within the live action, I think is totally fine, and it's cool to see it in live action. And for those who have never seen those, probably were like, holy shit, this is insane.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it works on both levels. But also we see Obi-Wan use the Obi-Wan stance in that fight scene, which I believe is the first time we ever see it in live action.
Not in live action, but
is it
in
not?
The Kenobi show. No, he does it in the prequels.
I do not remember it in the prequels ever. Damn.
When he fights Grievous, at least.
Okay, yes. But either way, we get to see his stance, which I think he does in that show. Like, and we, as I just falsely said, but he does it in that show. We also see a lot of the Force being used consistently throughout as well. Where
Yeah, I had that in my notes because this also
yeah.
ranked highly in mine. Lifting rocks. I am gonna have a lifting
great.
rocks Rogue One soon enough
You
because it just
should.
keeps coming up in all of Star Wars. But this fight revolves around lifting rocks to a decent extent.
Yes,
Yeah.
but we don't really see that often, right? It's just like using the Force plus until we saw Ahsoka, which I'm glad they're, kind of pushing this a little further to show. Yes, if you're a Force user, you're using lightsabers, but you can also use your other Force using abilities in combat, which also just makes sense because up until that point we really were just like, yes, it's just battles. It's like, yeah, I would definitely Force push someone consistently or lift rocks or push rocks or anything.
Yeah.
It's in my honorable mentions. I love it.
I do also dislike when people are like, "Oh yeah, it was good. I just think it could have been better."
I know. So
That
what does
said, I'm going to do that right now because
What does that mean?
the environment that they're fighting in, like
Yeah.
it's cool that it's like rocks and they use the rocks. Obviously,
It could have been better lit. Is that what you're gonna say?
I mean, it could have been like just a cooler, like more visually interesting backdrop for the fight. I mean, when you compare something like that versus their first battle on Mustafar,
Yes.
I mean, like when they're surrounded by that entire lava planet and they're just going from like location to location, like on floating machinery and falling towers and all this stuff. Like it's just so epic. And then they just kind of go to this rocky planet. But I think that speaks well to the lightsaber duel that they can do it in a fairly, boring environment and still be one of my favorite lightsaber battles.
Which is why I mean, I could be wrong. It could be a budget thing, right? It could be anything.
I'm
But
sure it is. Yeah.
But I also do feel like it makes a lot of sense thematically. Is that the last time they were fighting, they were in this very grandiose setting, right? And then it's so scaled back. Like the stakes are literally the galaxy is at stake when they're fighting on Mustafar. It feels like Obi-Wan is actively trying
Yeah.
to stop, and then now it is between two friends or two former friends.
Right,
and
it's
I
much
think
more a thematic one-on-one. Like I know the Mustafar
Yes.
fight was a one-on-one, but exactly
Yes.
what you're saying. I've never really thought about that. That's a great point.
Yeah, because I feel like they could have spiced it up within anything, but I do feel like it was purposely dark and small and intimate for that reason, because it was their reunion. And it honestly, it would have been cool to see it flashy, but again, I think thematically it makes sense and is, again, I keep saying it's the antithesis, but it is the antithesis of that fight.
I also rated this fight very highly. The last note that I had about it is Obi-Wan towards the beginning of the fight, he does a little roll, like a somersault roll away from Vader twice in a row. It feels like when you're playing a video game against an overpowered boss, and you just have to keep mashing
Side
Go,
B.
go, go, go.
Side B, side B, side
Yeah,
B.
it was exactly that. He does it, gets up, and does it again.
That's hilarious.
You know he's
I
gonna do
got a
it 3
chuckle out of
times,
that.
then he gets tired. Then that's when you attack. Then you gotta
Yep.
do it 3 more times.
And your
Yeah.
health is up by that point.
This is not Obi-Wan's first rodeo.
And before we move on, too, because we talked about some of the banter and some of the other duels, I want to talk about the banter in this one as well, because I also really liked it. I really like the part where, obviously, at the end, Obi-Wan says that my friend is truly dead, kind of bringing that whole story arc to a close. But then he leaves and he says goodbye, Darth, and he calls him Darth. And that's such a that is good fan service. Like, that is such a good way to help seal that story arc where he's like, he no longer sees him as Anakin. He now sees him as Darth Vader. He calls him Darth. And it addresses why he calls him Darth in A New Hope. Like, that was so good.
Yes, that's another. It's not as aggressive as making a whole movie to fill a small plot hole like Rogue One, but I've heard that joke before that like, oh, what does Obi-Wan call him Darth if it's not a first name, it's just a title? But it makes sense given the events of Kenobi that he views Anakin as being completely consumed by the Darth persona, by the Sith.
Can you imagine if that's where they started and worked backwards? Like, okay, well, so we know we want to fill in this gap, but what's the backstory to that?
Someone leaves the room and then comes back in 3 hours. All right, so Reva. Wait, who?
Like when someone spends 15 minutes setting up the most complicated board game you can possibly imagine and then just leans back. Okay.
Every game we ever play with Max.
I wish I did that joke 100 different ways. There's much better ways to have started that. Someone starts at that point, leaves the room, comes back a couple hours later. All right, so where are we? Okay, so Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers, right? He's going to kidnap 9-year-old Leia. Whoa. We're talking about why he calls him Darth? Yeah, we get there.
Star Wars loves basis.
Matt, what do
Yes.
you have for your number 3?
I was waiting. So this is not a technicality, but really it's anything from the Twilight of the Apprentice, right? And so back to back, just great lightsaber battles the entire time. So originally, I don't want to.
Twilight of the Apprentice is the season 2 finale of Rebels.
It is indeed, yes, which I think is maybe the best or second best episode of Rebels. Obviously, when Kanan dies may be the best. Anyway, so I did not go with Ahsoka versus Vader in the end. I mean, I absolutely love it, and I was like, that was my gut instinct to go with it first. But the Maul and Kanan and Ahsoka versus the Inquisitors, I think, is a better lightsaber battle. It is insane to see Maul team up with Ahsoka and Kanan.
I am a sucker for a good team up, yeah.
I mean, out of nowhere. And then also Kanan gets blinded. Like, it is.
Yeah, good ending.
Yes, exactly. So that is the ending, right? Is that he is blinded. And so that is like an insane ending that you feel, like, you feel that hit. Like, you literally hear that. You hear the hit, and all of a sudden you are blinded with Kanan. And you're like, whoa, what just happened? And I do love the intensity of the Ahsoka and Vader fight, and obviously everything's closing in, they're leaving, it's intense.
I'm sorry, are you talking about the
Sorry, I'm not talking about
because maybe one of us does want to talk about that
yeah sorry. Okay, so I was trying to hint the first time, then I wasn't going to go into it, but no one said anything, so okay, so yes, I'm going to go with the 3v3, but the Inquisitor fight I think is absolutely insane. There's something about like Kanan versus the Inquisitors in general, I think, that just consistently has great battles. And obviously it's an animation, so they can kind of do whatever they want, but they really do whatever they want in these episodes, like whatever they want. And I don't know, I love it. I think just like the team up aspect alone, having Kanan and Ahsoka, but then you versus Maul, and then all of a sudden that turns into Maul and Ahsoka and Kanan versus the Inquisitors, and all of a sudden you're like, there is this common evil, and I do love, like you just said, Max, you love a good team up, and I think this does it the best out of maybe any Star Wars.
Yeah,
Dave
that's a
Filoni
good
does
team
such
up.
a good job of escalating too, because season 1 of Rebels ended so well with Kanan fighting the Grand Inquisitor. I imagine after that they were like, all right, Dave, so how's season 2 gonna end? And he's like, hear me out, Ezra and Kanan and Maul versus Inquisitors.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what? Yeah.
It's Ahsoka though, not Ezra.
Or
Is
Ahsoka.
Ezra
Yeah,
not
yeah.
part of that fight? I couldn't remember. I did not rewatch this one.
No, he's going up to.
Oh yeah, he's getting the holocron
Yep.
into the thing. As amazing as an ending it is for Kanan in this fight,
Mhm.
it is pretty lame ending for one of the Inquisitors that just flies off with the helicopter mode and then it breaks and then he falls to his death.
No, that is
that
hilarious.
always gets a chuckle out of me.
Not if it's the same Inquisitor from Ahsoka.
Yeah, I know that was the Marok Inquisitor, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
It's so funny though.
Allegedly.
I do love a good
Allegedly.
fake out death like that. Like every time there's like a moment where I'm just like, oh, that person's safe, but like in my head they're like, oh, that person's gonna die, and then they get away. I'm like, oh, that was insane. But that was a moment where I'm like, oh, well, that's actually insane.
I like Dave Filoni when he talks about the Inquisitor lightsabers being used as helicopters, how he's like, yeah, we took a couple swings, not all of them are fantastic, and he was kind of like joking about it and stuff. But I like to imagine like the behind the scenes of coming up with that, and he's like, oh, and then they just kind of fly away with their lightsaber blades, and someone like practically speaking was like trying to push back but didn't know how, so they were just like, well, can't that like break? That doesn't seem like a very good idea. And Dave's like, oh, that's a good idea, I should show that.
It's also one of those.
keep it grounded,
It can break. It's risky.
yeah,
It's also
this is
one of
why you
those-
don't see it very often.
It's also one of those things where, like, how do you explain that to a child? It's like when you fight and someone dies, it's like, oh yeah, that's battle. But when it's like, yeah, accidents happen all the time. Like it's like,
Not everything's a lesson, kiddo. Sometimes you just die.
I really gotcha, Max.
Dark.
All right, moving back to myself, my number 3
Back
favorite
to
battle.
myself. Look, moving back to the person I want to hear the most from, myself.
I just wait for you guys to shut up. My number 3 is Maul and Savage versus Darth Sidious in the Clone Wars.
10 out of 10.
That's a good one.
It is not that great story. So like I
Wait,
said
what?
how I rated out of 10 in terms of Flash and story and ending. This got a hard 10 for Flash and ending.
Mhm.
With the ending when Sidious kills Savage for one, and then Savage says, I was never worthy to be your apprentice to Maul, is heartbreaking. And then
Mm-hmm.
Darth Maul takes out, so as to not be unfair to Sidious, at first when it's Savage and Maul is using one lightsaber and Savage is using his one double-bladed lightsaber, and Sidious has his 2 lightsabers. And then after Savage dies, Maul takes out his dark saber so that they each have 2 lightsabers, which is a more fair fight. And visually, it just looks so badass to see 3 lightsabers and 1 dark saber in the same battle. And then Maul loses because of course, and he asks for mercy, and Sidious says there is no mercy and starts force lightning him. That's super cool. And upon rewatching this, there was something else I wanted to talk about, because Maul has a very, very good reputation for being a duelist, but his record is atrocious. The man puts up nothing but L's. He loses to Obi-Wan. He loses to Sidious. He loses to Obi-Wan again. He loses to Ahsoka again on Mandalore. He's 0-2 in this arena. I guess you could say he's 1-2 because he does
better
beat-
that he could be fighting though.
That's true.
This is
He's
the-
always going
the
up against
cream
the
of the
greatest.
crop.
But people say that Maul is like one of the best duelists in the Star Wars universe. And I'm like, well, he's
He
at
beat
least worse
Qui-Gon.
than the 3 he fought. Yeah, he did
Qui-Gon's
beat
supposed to be
Qui-Gon.
known for dueling,
He
right?
duels a lot, but he doesn't always win. But we also
I think he overall has a negative record.
there's those comic storylines we need to start bulking up of him just murking people.
That's true. I have read that Darth Maul comic, and he does murk people. It's pretty awesome.
And speaking of Darth Maul comics, I think that battle is what leads into the Darth Maul Son of Dathomir comic book.
Yeah, which is also a good comic book. But number 3, Maul and Savage against Sidious. It's just so cool visually and narratively. You get some lore on the Rule of Two that is vague at times, and it's like, does anyone actually care about this? But you get a definitive answer that Sidious does care about it, and so
He does indeed.
I really like that fight. But
I agree.
we can move on. Max, we're getting into number 2s.
Number 2 territory, yes. My number 2, if I can pull it up, is... Okay, so this is the technicality one that I wanted to talk about.
Interesting.
I have Snoke's throne room as my number 2. And the reason it's a technicality is because, again, lightsabers don't actually clash at all. In fact, the two lightsabers are on the same team against lightsaber
battle,
adjacent weapons.
It counts.
I counted it. I
yeah.
counted it.
Same.
All right. Yeah, it is. I mean, we talk about The Last Jedi a lot on this podcast, but it's one of my favorite movies. That throne room scene, the music, the choreography. People give it crap. I really like the choreography. I thought it was the most prequel-esque of all the sequel trilogy duels. Like we were talking about with The Force Awakens in the forest, that scene, the iconography from this scene, I think, is some of the best in the entire sequel trilogy. That shot of Snoke's corpse just tumbling over himself as Rey lifts her hand into screen to grab her lightsaber. That look that Kylo and Rey share as they realize what he has just done, and then the minute that they go back to back and everything slows down and the music cuts back in, and then all 6 or 8 Praetorian guards come at them at once. It is just so cool. And then you see them kind of help each other out too, which is awesome.
I'm pretty sure it's 6.
6. And then another thing that we get to see in it too is a split second of Kylo Ren defending himself using the hilt on his lightsaber, which is always fun to see.
It is indeed.
I would say that's like the only time we ever see him use that crossguard feature, but he also uses it in one of Matt's favorite ones to get Finn's shoulder when they're like interlocked. So he does use it a good amount.
I think he uses it like in almost every battle. They find a way to use it in, because in the beginning of The Rise of Skywalker, when he's on Mustafar and he's just slaughtering all those people, it was one of the trailer shots actually. He picks that person up like with it impaled on him and like slams him down.
Does.
He's stabbing him with that part of the
Once per
lightsaber.
I love unique instances of lightsaber combat, which is another reason why I really like this fight, because the Praetorian Guards don't have lightsabers, and I don't even know what I would call it is that they have, but they're all different. Some of them have like 2 little daggers, some of them have like long chain things,
They're
and
the
some have
Ninja
staffs.
Turtles of this universe.
I was just about to say that.
That's hilarious. I love Ninja Turtles, and I was not even thinking that. That's hilarious.
Yeah,
That's
like they
so
some
true.
had nunchucks, some had size. Yeah.
What Ninja Turtle are you for the Force for Thought? You're Donatello.
Oh, thank
You're
you.
wearing purple right now.
Yep.
That's fair.
I will take it.
You're a
I'm not
classic.
going to like what you're going to say.
You're a classic Michelangelo, and I'm a Leo.
Oh, okay. Good. I am glad with that. That's exactly what I wanted.
No one wants to be Raph.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, that guy's a dick. Everyone needs him in a group. But
Who did you think I was
no
going
one
to
wants
say you
be
were?
him. I thought you were going to say I'm Leonardo.
No. Yeah, I'm Leonardo.
Okay,
Come on.
good. I much prefer this dynamic.
All right, Matt, you're number 2.
Yes. Oh, real quick, going off of the that. I mean, yeah.
Oh, I'm
that's,
sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
That was obviously my honorable
Matt,
mentions.
gas me up. Let's go.
Yeah. All right, Michelangelo. No, I mean, obviously it's an amazing scene, but going back to the choreography, I mean, there's nothing else we haven't already said about it before. But if you're thinking about the choreography in that scene and not thinking, oh shit, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen in my entire life, as you're watching that scene, what are you doing? Like, I feel like you are literally fooling yourself. Like, oh my god, as a fan, like that was an insane moment. Like, again, in the theater, insane time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people love showing that scene at 0.25 times speed, and they're like, this guy's just waiting for his mark until the lightsaber moves so he could block it. And it's like, that's how every single lightsaber fight is. It's not real life, bro.
Correct.
You
Yeah.
Go back and watch the prequels.
Yeah.
And that's what kills me the most, is that the people who argue that usually love the prequels. And it's like, you understand, whatever.
I know. It's also, maybe they're just thinking ahead. They're like, this guy's getting murked. How can I be tactful about this and not end up like that? Think with your brain, not your mind. I know. And then,
Matt,
sorry.
what's your number 2?
My number 2 is Luke versus Vader in Empire Strikes Back. Obviously, we begin in one of the coolest settings, I think, for this fight to begin. Yes, we have a weird Vader moment when he flies back, but besides that, the whole thing is really rad. And obviously, then we end with one of the most famous scenes in all of, not Star Wars, but just cinema in general.
Well, as we said before, most famous does not necessarily mean best or coolest, but go on.
Gives it a lot of credit, though.
It does indeed, and also it's my number 2, not my number 1. But it also is these two classic characters. I think when you have, Darth Vader, this really scary villain, versus Luke Skywalker, our hero, and they change locations consistently throughout. And I love that cat and mouse game, especially when he's in the hallway right before he goes out on the ledge. There's not much happening.
When Darth
in that
Vader
scene.
was holding his breath.
What? What?
When Darth Vader's holding his breath and Luke's like looking for him, and then
Yes.
he pops out around the corner and he's winded and he's like
Yeah.
really breathing heavy.
It's funny. I never really took it
I've never
like
noticed
that.
that either. Is he actually breathing heavy at that
Yeah,
part?
he's gassed. Go watch it.
Because you don't hear him breathing? You don't hear the...
Yes.
Or
Interesting.
he's really hustling to like a shortcut.
Or that. Yeah, he ran that way. Either way, you don't hear the breathing while Luke's like being spooked out looking
Yeah.
for him, and then you hear it. He's panting.
And that's like a great middle of that arc, right? I think when we see Han get frozen in carbonite, and we were seeing that set used again, and it's foggy and spooky, and we're able to see this from really far away, and as the scene progresses, we're getting closer and closer. It's becoming more claustrophobic. And it's funny because the setting is claustrophobic when we begin, but it slowly starts to expand, and all of a sudden we're in this massive void, which I don't even know what that room would really be used for, to be honest. But then in the opposite side, we're starting very far back, and we're seeing the steps, and then we're closing in on them, and we're very tight. So it's contrasting, which I think is very cool to look at, and it's very spooky, I think, to see these claustrophobic settings in such a far back view, and then these really massive settings in such a very claustrophobic view. And then beyond that, we get this great dynamic between Vader and Luke. At the end of them battling it out, we're like, oh my god, like, no, he is indeed his father. And obviously that's a great line and stuff, but like, even taking that out, I mean, I think it's a great cap and a great ending. But also, Luke is bested. He is defeated. He is beat.
Yes, it's a good ending to a fight. Like, he gets his hand cut off, and that's the end of the fight. You can't come back from that.
You cannot.
Especially when you consider the fact that Luke didn't know he was going to be okay by falling down that endless pit. He genuinely thought that just taking the L and just dying right here is better than falling to the dark side.
Yes, exactly. So that's my number 2.
I also rated this one very highly. I gave it a 10 for story and ending, only a 5 for flashy, just because old,
Yeah.
It's just not exciting.
That doesn't surprise me about you. But that doesn't surprise me about Matt either for picking it. And I'm glad that you did, because I had this listed on my list. I was going to have it as an honorable mention if nobody talked about it, just because it is iconic. You have to talk about that, right? But I couldn't fit it into my top 5. So I'm very glad that you did. And I'm really excited for what your number 1 is, because there's also another one like that I couldn't talk about, but really hope someone did.
Yeah, I'm really interested in my number 1 as well. I'm really surprised no one put it.
I will say one last thing about the Luke Vader fight in Empire. When Luke finally gets a hit on Vader and he like hits his shoulder, and Vader says like "oh" and winces. That is such an eerie moment, because it's like, oh yay, Luke is winning, but like, oh god, Luke, you shouldn't have done that. He's pissed. You just upset him more. All right, my number 2, which actually shocks me because I can't believe it's so low. It is the Duel of the Fates, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon versus Maul in The Phantom Menace.
I knew that this list wasn't going to be right either.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
So that is one of the best songs. I'll just start there. One of the best songs in all of Star Wars,
If not,
at least top 3. The speed that Maul fights with, and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, the intensity. It was I always get upset with Matt when he credits something for being the first, but it really I give this one credit when it's not fair because I so frequently say that's stupid, but it was the first cool Star Wars fight in Star Wars, and they just make it so much better than it was, and it's such an improvement on anything that it was before. And but it still holds up by today's standards because it's still one of the best ones.
But you see that it's not it's not me saying it's old because it's old. It's because you have an emotional attachment to it, Luke.
Yes.
So now going forward, every single time I say that is because it is emotional attachment. Much because I watch movies from the 70s and 60s and I understand the sci-fi behind it. So Star Wars does it better than Logan's Run, than anything else. This is exactly how I feel about the original trilogy.
I'm gonna go ahead and move us along because I feel like I'm losing this battle.
Matt is currently taking the timestamp of this argument so that he can play this in future episodes.
Anyway, what do you guys think of the Duel of the Fates?
No,
Yeah, obviously it was great. I mean,
a double-bladed lightsaber, like that's bad.
yeah, you see him and the music kicks in with the chorus of the singers and everything.
Yes.
It is obviously iconic. Yeah, every single thing about it. The emotional stakes, the outcome, the fact that Qui-Gon dies, Obi-Wan slicing Qui-Gon. No. Ooh, that took a turn. Slicing Maul in half and then having him fall down an endless pit is such a satisfying ending. Yeah, every single thing about it, 10 out of 10.
I will say, when I was rewatching it, I was just pulling up YouTube videos of all of these, even though I do subscribe to Disney Plus. But because Disney Plus is such
hard.
garbage on a computer and like fast forwarding to try to pick out an exact scene, it never works. I always have to pull it up on my phone to do it, and I
It's
just
also
wanted to watch
hard
it on
because
my
it's a
computer.
very long fight. We should give it credit just for its sheer length too. I mean, a lot of these
Yes.
fights that I'm choosing, like especially some of these newer ones, they're relatively short in length. That
Yes.
one has tons and tons of choreography to it.
Yep.
But the YouTube video I watched, it cut off at Qui-Gon's death.
No.
It's like, well,
There's a whole other half.
I
my
really
friend.
like the Obi-Wan Darth Maul part, but
Yeah.
whatever. But even without that part, I still rated this at my number 2.
In all transparency, this is my number 1. And I think it is because it came out when we were kids, and I think when you're watching that, you're like, "Oh my god, this is again." It does what almost all the battles in the original trilogy. It just does it better, and beyond that, it has emotional stakes. It has two massive surprise endings. In '99, you're just like, "Oh my god, Qui-Gon Jinn, the leader of this trilogy, is now dead, and the villain of this trilogy, Darth Maul, is now dead." Like that's insane. And beyond that, again, I don't forget what phrase you used earlier, but talking about Darth Maul's like gaze. Striking gaze, I think.
He was like stalking his prey.
Yes, it is so spooky and so eerie. And then we also get even in the hangar. That's where the fight starts, and we see the second second blade come out, and you're like, "That's an amazing beginning to that fight."
And it's so badass when Qui-Gon just says, "We'll handle this," and then Padme says, "We'll take the long way."
Yeah,
it's
yes.
such a cool
that's
start
a great
to a
line.
fight.
And then also just like
And then they
the
derobe.
yes, and then the red blockade for waiting for them to
The
get
shield, yeah.
the shield.
It's a great character moment. You see Qui-Gon meditating and
Yes.
Maul stalking him.
Yeah, and it's like, why are those shields there? I do not know. But it doesn't matter. Again, what was that room for? An Empire? Do not know.
That's the type of world building that I like, though, where you see something and you're just like, "What is that?"
Yeah.
Like,
And who
there's other
cares?
types
It's
of
like-
world building where you're just like, "Oh, that makes sense. Like, that's like this Earth's equivalent of this
Yes.
thing," But it's funner when you see stuff like that and you're just like,
I agree.
I don't know what it is, but it's adding to the story. It's adding to this
Yes.
fight.
Something to do with plasma farming, because that's what they were doing in that. That's what that structure is for.
See, and it's like, what does that even mean? But it's like,
I know.
especially in the
The
late
hell
90s,
even is that?
in early 2000s, like 13 Ghosts. You guys ever see that movie? It's the same thing where the room locks and unlocks, and you're like, wait, what? Like, that doesn't make any sense, but you instantly just like, yeah, I like what this is doing, so I'm just gonna buy into it. And it's the same thing where it's just so creepy as those lock and unlock, and you're just in suspense the entire time. I absolutely love that fight.
All right, before we get our number ones, let's talk about some honorable mentions. Max, you have any?
Do I?
Yeah, I gotta.
The hell is this, Max? Do you want me to go?
Well, because my list has changed significantly, so now I'm like
No.
paranoid that
You
I'm
should-
about to
we can talk about them after number
give
one.
out
What do you-
someone's
What do you got
number
for
You should
honorable
also-
mentions? Assuming it's not the Ahsoka Vader fight.
It's not. And also, that's amazing number one choice, too. Jesus Christ.
I was hoping someone else took it. I didn't want to talk too much about it when I talked about the.
You should, man. I
Obi-Wan
was really starting to
Vader
bait.
fight.
I was like, anybody gonna say anything not to go further? And Luke, you didn't. But you should really talk about the Obi-Wan Anakin fight though a little bit more, Max, because I really fumbled that in the beginning. But I can run through some quick honorable mentions. One is one of the newer ones, which I'm sure Luke you can talk about. But I really like the Balin Skull Ahsoka fight.
The
Love
first
it.
fight or their second fight? Because I had both.
The first fight actually.
I like that one better too.
Right? It's a load of fun. Again, I don't want to talk to them in these really necessarily in full depth. We've talked a lot of them.
I'll just
yes.
say he lifts a rock. More rock
Boom!
lifting.
Don't spoil it. And then, Mac, this is my technicality one too. Is the Obi-Wan versus Jango fight? I love when they're on. I think that is such a fun battle. It's not even really. It's not a battle. It's more of a kind of a quick fight. He doesn't use his lightsaber for most of it, to be honest. But that whole scene and sequence, I love it. And it's raining. And I think he uses his lightsaber, really, in a really cool way. And you're like, oh, especially in Attack the Clones, we were just like, you want more action. That movie is built on moments, like we talked about, and I think that is one of the moments.
In that scene, I always think it's funny when they fall off the edge and Django's holding up Obi-Wan and got his dagger thing in the side. And so he can't use his left arm because it's holding him onto the thing. So he has to pull up his Obi-Wan arm to disconnect it. That is so annoying. You just know if he had survived the next day, he would have made like a button that he can press with only his right hand on his right hand.
Yeah,
to
it's really
deactivate
fixing that immediately.
That is a fault. I also have here Luke versus Vader in Return of the Jedi. It is very spooky. We always talk about that, how they're hunting. I love that fight.
That was an honorable mention that I had.
Right?
Yeah. Anything from Return of the Jedi is fantastic, though.
Yes. Obi-Wan versus Vader in A New Hope. Luke, I know you hate this, but it's not the fight itself, right?
That one would get a 0 for Flash.
I'm so
If I
surprised
even
that's what your
wasted
number
my
one is
time.
now, Matthew. I thought that's what you were going to go with.
It's not. No, my number one is the Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan versus Maul. That's why I'm running through these now, because it's already said.
I'll pick another one for your number one, then and we'll come back to
You
it.
know what? I will. And then the Vader last thing is like it is 0 Flash, but it is what it represents, and the fact that it is now that scene means even more that he just gives up, and I think it is a nice fight, and is then we're able to have Luke, Leia, and Han get away. Anyway.
My honorable mentions have all been talked about. So I'll use my time to talk more about the Ahsoka versus Baylan fight because it's so cool. Did Ahsoka think Sabine would destroy the map if she died, but would be used as a prisoner by Baylan to keep the map around if she survived? So she kind of intentionally died, but fell off the ledge because Sabine is there, and Ahsoka wants Sabine to destroy the map. And I think in Ahsoka's mind, she's thinking, if I can't win this fight. If I stalemate this fight, Sabine will not destroy the map in order to trade it for my life. But if I lose this fight, then Sabine will rage destroy it right now.
Man, she is a gambling woman if that's what she was thinking.
And it didn't pay off.
It did not pay off.
No.
if that was what she was thinking, yeah. That's
I just had that thought. I also had rated on my rating scale, and then upon rewatch, it fell close to the bottom of my list, unfortunately. But the Shin Hati Sabine fight won on Lothal. That, in terms of, you guys were talking about giving so much credit to like what stays with you and what you remember. That is maybe the most memorable scene from Ahsoka for me, because that was
interesting.
I just love that fight. I love Shin Hati, as you know, and that was so new for Sabine to be doing lightsaber battle, and the banter where Shin Hati says, "I'm looking for that," and Sabine says, "That's too bad." And there's some really cool action shots of Shin Hati. I won't describe the shots, but there's some really cool poses, and that one scene where when Sabine is like on her back, holding herself up, like doing most of a crab walk, but still fighting back against Shin.
Yeah.
And then the ending, she gets stabbed, but she survives, which I said before I don't really like that much, but the shock value was so high because that's just such a good ending. Like, she won. Like, you didn't stand a chance this whole time, Sabine.
She was right outside of a major metropolitan area, though. They were able to get her immediate
Exactly.
medical
That one
attention.
makes sense. The Reva one makes less sense.
Qui-Gon was in the planet's core, essentially. There was no getting him help.
Qui-Gon had
And
to
Obi-Wan
sit there and
was-
slowly die for another 20 minutes while Obi-Wan killed them all.
Yeah.
I'm loving this episode. So let me just get this straight. Something that's new and flashy that you really remember on the top of your head, you don't remember it's not as good at watching the second time, where something that you remember at a core memory that is older you like better. My God.
Yeah, I'm all over the place. I can't even say it's a gut thing, because sometimes it's not.
It is a gut thing.
Luke,
That's why I was
that
so
is-
surprised that you went with such objective criteria for this.
That is growth, my friend. I am proud of you.
That is growth.
We have made progress. This whole podcast is actually therapy. We are done with it.
Everyone's allowed to like what they like. All right, I'm gonna go into my number one because
Well,
I've
real
already
quick,
said
I want to
multiple
talk about
times
one
what it
more
is.
honorable
Yeah,
mention
go ahead.
because Matt talked about that Jango Fett Obi-Wan fight, which really calls into question what is a lightsaber duel. So
Yeah,
Well,
I didn't
duels are
push
different.
back. I would say not that one. I would not have counted that on my list.
I want to count it just because I also want to include as an honorable mention just the entire Geonosis arena battle.
Geonosis, I think, is a good one too. But to me, it's also
That
yeah.
does
I mean,
muddy
it's,
the
there's
line
no-
more. I would count that more
There's
than
no
the Jango Fett
lightsabers
fight.
clashing.
Yeah, that's
that's
interesting.
true. But it is like,
But we
it's
should
a-
talk about it.
lightsaber-
It's a good scene.
It is amazing.
It's I guess that's true. Is it lightsaber duel, which implies two, or is it lightsaber battle, which is a little different? I think because that's just a battle with lightsabers.
I know I'm gonna get some flack for saying this, but it's a gut thing. Sometimes you just know it when you see it.
I agree,
Because like I thought
but-
we were gonna talk about the Luke Kylo fight at the end of the Last Jedi, which maybe we still are.
Maybe we will. Yeah,
Okay.
that might come up.
Maybe it'll come up, but and we can talk about it then. So just cut this part. But yeah, the Geonosis fight, super cool. I will say then I also wanted to talk about the Anakin, Obi-Wan, Yoda versus Dooku at the end of Attack of the Clones.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I would rate that one highly, but it just has horrible endings for the Anakin Obi-Wan section and for the Yoda section.
Yeah.
The fights never really end. They just all the characters just kind of walk away. But I'm just thinking upon rewatching that, Obi-Wan and Anakin are getting whooped 10 ways to Sunday, and they eventually lose and are about to be killed, and then Yoda comes hobbling in, moving at half the speed of smell, and starts fighting Count Dooku, and it's like, oh, actually, he can move super fast, and
Yeah.
he's just saving it. If Yoda took even a little bit of that hustle and just got there when Obi-Wan and Anakin were not defeated, they could have killed killed Count Dooku so easily and saved the whole galaxy from the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
If
And
he just had a little urgency.
talking about like the anticlimactic ending of that battle when he just kind of like drops that pillar and Yoda just has to like take a second to save them real quick. I always think of that shot where Obi-Wan is just laying really awkwardly like on his side of his arm and he's
Yes.
he's looking up at that tower falling on him and Yoda has to catch it and I'm like, you're conscious, like you
I
can
know.
help.
At least Anakin had the decency to be asleep.
Yeah, he passed out, he lost a limb, that makes sense. Obi-Wan had only one of his arms a little bit sliced, right? Like his other arm was still working.
Yeah, he makes a full recovery with no medical attention.
Yeah, you could have helped out a little bit there, bud.
Also, it doesn't look like that big of a pipe. Like, Obi-Wan doesn't even try. He's like, oh, this is how I go.
This is it.
The Jedi Council needs more personal reviews. Yoda, a little bit quicker, please.
Got to talk about your year-end
Obi-
assessment,
yeah.
Obi-Wan.
Yeah, oh yeah. Obi-Wan, just a little bit more hustle, please.
All right. Are we ready for number ones? I'm going to get into mine because I keep talking about it.
Let it rip.
Ahsoka versus Vader in Star Wars Rebels. Let me pull up my notes. Excuse me for not having them ready. In live action, in lightsaber fights, there's a pretty stark difference in, not even to mention the original trilogy, but between the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy. And I think I've talked about this on the pod before, so Matt, please stop me when I start repeating myself too much. But in the sequels, they had the technology where they could use the light sticks that have the light reflect on the
Yeah.
actors, and that was such an improvement. And in the prequels, they didn't have that, and so the light doesn't reflect on the actors, and it looks worse upon rewatch. But they did, where they were able to do the fight choreography with just sticks that they could whip around at
Yeah.
lightning fast speeds, and so the fights look cooler in terms of the choreography, but they look worse in terms of the effects. But animation can really have their cake and eat it too in that regard, because
Yep.
they're able to do whatever they want. They're able to have the choreography be so fast and so fluid. They can do 12 different moves in 1 second, and this fight really shows that, especially on a rewatch, because like I said, when I first did my ratings, this was like middle to the bottom end of my list, but then when I rewatched it, it shot up to number 1 or 2, because it is so cool when Ahsoka and Vader like go outside of that the temple kind of thing, and they're like fighting on the outskirts. They're really like that's some of the best animation fight choreography, or maybe even live action, I guess. I don't know, but that's a big statement. But that's just really good choreography for a fight. And then the emotional implications that, like, of course, Ahsoka and Vader have all this history and story together, but Ahsoka doesn't come back to slice off Vader's half helmet until Vader was capturing the holocron and gonna get Ezra and Kanan. So she like did it to save her friends, which is a great beat
Yeah.
for her character and for the story of all of their characters. And yeah, it's just such a cool moment. All of the dialogue, when Ahsoka says, "I will avenge his death," and Vader says, "That's not the Jedi way," and she says, "I'm no Jedi." Obviously, a super Not that it matters that it's iconic, but it has become a
Who
very
are you?
it's a very good line. It really stays with me as well as
I
other
felt like we took a pause and 15 years have passed, Luke. I'm like, who are you right now? I'm so proud.
Anyway, what do you guys want to say about this?
And
Seeing
also,
his eye.
this is coming off the heels of Kanan being blinded, which is my number 3. I absolutely love this fight, and it ends so well, and it ends on such a mystery. And again, Rebels at the end of season 2, I love Rebels, but I love the ending of Rebels season 1, which I might talk about in a minute. But at the end of season 2, I was like, whoa, this is an amazing show. And I feel like that is what fully solidified it. I love that fight.
Star Wars frequently does cliffhangers like this at the end of seasons or series as a whole, and it was a real twist that we got the resolution to this cliffhanger in Rebels, because it happens and like, oh, we don't know what happened to Ahsoka. Maybe we'll see in a series coming up. But like the show Rebels keeps marching on in terms of the timeline, and you would not expect that you would go back in time, so to speak. We know World Between Worlds, but that was a really nice way for Dave Filoni and company to handle that, but not make us wait another 6 years like I fear is going to happen with Baylan Skoll and Peridia and stuff.
There was a Star Wars celebration where they made a really big deal about that because they didn't know if she died or not. And Dave Filoni, during a panel, was wearing a T-shirt that said "Ahsoka lives?" ? And so it was like kind of trolling everyone because no one knows if she lived or died or anything. And then I think they premiered a trailer for Rebels that she was in or something. And so he it was like a patch, and he removed the question mark, and it was like an exclamation mark or something like that.
That's so cool.
And so it said Ahsoka lives.
I have not seen that. I'm gonna YouTube that later.
Yeah,
so am I.
worth a Google.
That might be my new weekly warm up for the days to watch.
I've heard the phrase Ahsoka lives a lot before, like in the fandom, in the community. They say that a lot, but I never knew what it was from, really.
I don't know if it's from that or if that was a thing and then Dave Filoni was playing off of it. I wonder which one came first.
Yeah.
Chicken or egg,
All right. What do you guys have for your number ones? Max?
I went with the Luke versus Kylo Ren ending to The Last Jedi, and this was another technicality question. I think it's obviously a lightsaber duel. You got two people with the lightsaber dueling each other. They just happen to never touch, because we know that Luke was teaching old Ben Solo one last lesson.
And the security guard from Resident Evil was there, right?
And the what?
No touching.
Oh, no touching. Wow, that's a deep reference. I really
hope
hope
you would get. I would assume.
I hope there's a lot of fans to our podcast who appreciate that reference.
I don't get it.
Everyone just yelled.
For all those people sitting at home.
Your brother Jake will love it.
I'm with you.
So.
No touching. But yeah, it's a great emotional climax. The story, the story arc for Luke coming to a close in that moment. Kylo Ren, it's beautiful. Obviously, the whole illusion where he kind of stabs him and it goes right through him and you realize what's happening, that he wasn't there, and then you have to watch it a second time and it gets even better because then you start noticing that the footprints weren't making the snow red because there was no weight there.
I was just gonna say, I remember after that movie people were talking about it. I was like, well, I guess I'll see this tomorrow again.
Yeah. I remember it was I have to put it as my number one because it is one of the it was one of the strangest feelings I had watching a movie, because I was kind of sick to my stomach at first because I was like, what is going on?
You were worried they were going to go full dumb with it.
Yeah,
I had the
because
same feeling
I was
when he got shot with the AT-AT and it's like, okay, so he's just a god now?
Yeah.
But then it all just makes sense.
But I also did notice that his hair and everything was just totally different. And I was like, why does he just look so different? And then the lightsaber really stuck out to me. I was like, he doesn't have... We just watched that lightsaber get destroyed 2 minutes ago. What happened?
Yeah.
And then it finally revealed and it all comes together, and it was the ultimate climax where I was like, oh, thank God. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's actually so beautiful. And then you start thinking about all the story elements that went into that and everything. And it's beautiful. And again, Luke Skywalker, the ultimate Jedi. Jedi uses their power for defense, not destruction or whatever that saying is. And that was the ultimate lesson of that he was able to save all of his friends. He was able to give them time to escape, and he did the whole thing without ever even being there or literally swinging his lightsaber.
I never thought of this, but do you think Leia was pissed when he gave her a fake gift of Han's dice?
I think she knew that he was a hologram that whole time, because
So she had to pretend she was excited about a gift?
That's the worst, isn't
was-
it? You're like, oh, thanks.
She was really excited that his hologram was there, and that was his way of saying like Han died, and I'm acknowledging it to you.
I'm not a Last Jedi hater. I do wish.
No, you're not, because it's our favorite movie as a podcast.
It is. But
Because Legacy doesn't
Matt
matter.
wants to revisit.
Yeah, we're gonna
Matt
rewatch.
wants to revisit the rankings now.
but I do wish that there was a different moment between Luke and R2. That's the only thing I was gonna say. I don't mind the wink or whatever. But
You mean Luke and 3PO or Luke and R2?
sorry, 3PO. Yeah,
Okay.
you're right.
I agree with that. I don't like the wink, and I don't like the shoulder brush after he gets annihilated by those.
The
AT-ATs.
shoulder brush is one of those things that I think it feels like somebody that was like almost 50 wrote it. That was like, oh, this is
trying
cool.
to be cool and hip, like,
Yeah.
oh, wouldn't it be cool,
Yeah,
kids? And
that
I
is.
was like, eh.
Me and you talked about that a lot about like writing stuff, and when you were like, just try to make things as most copacetic as possible. Like if that was in Empire Strikes Back, like that would have not aged well, and it's the same thing now. There's again, whether they say goons, which doesn't make any sense, or they say ghouls in Rise of Skywalker, because I have a feeling it says
say
it's
ghouls.
It's definitely not ghouls. I wish it
The
was
subtitles
ghouls.
say ghouls.
Ghouls.
It doesn't make any sense. What does that mean?
You think they changed it in post? They were like, why don't we just said they said this in the subtitles?
Yeah, I think they're like, we messed up bad.
They didn't even want to do a reshoot. They were like, just put it in the subtitles.
You know what's funny? A reshoot. It's just a voice.
Yeah, that'd have been an easy thing to fix, even in post.
Unless they could get what's his name back, because wasn't that a famous cameo? Who says it?
It's not Daniel Craig, is it? Or Tom Hardy? Maybe Tom
No,
No, but
Daniel Craig was in
He was
Force
in the
Awakens,
Force Awakens,
I think.
yeah. I kind of think that was a famous cameo, but I can't remember who it was now
Yeah.
either. But the Luke Kylo fight, one last thing I wanted to say is that Mark Hamill's performance in The Last Jedi has been very well praised and very well deservedly. But the one moment that doesn't get enough praise, I think, because it could fall so flat, is when Kylo Ren, the first thing they say to each other, and Kylo Ren says, "Are you here to say you're sorry to say, or to say you forgive me to save my soul?" And Luke says no. Like, the way I just said it, that's not that cool of a
Yeah.
moment. But the way Mark Hamill delivers it, and he says no, and just I just love that
Yeah.
acting moment, that Luke Skywalker moment. It's such a cool part.
He's a cool guy.
All right, Matt, what do you have for your number one? Our last number one.
Yes, so technically this is my number 6. This is actually my number 6 as my honorable mention. Obviously, as we talked about, the Qui-Gon Obi-Wan versus Maul is my number 1. But this one is I'm glad I get to spend a little bit of time on and appreciate, which is we already talked about a little bit, which is the ending of season 1 of Rebels, which is the Kanan and Ezra versus the Grand Inquisitor fight. Absolutely loved it. It was the first fight in Rebels that really blew me away, and the fact that they're going on multiple levels, and you know Ezra at that point is so new to this world, and is Kanan's trying to train him, and you finally kind of see this master and apprentice dynamic really coming into full and coming into its fruition, and you're being able to see where it can grow, which is why I think when Kanan dies, it is so sad, because it's not fully developed yet. It's not fully there, which seems to happen a lot actually between Padawans and masters, I guess. But yeah, I absolutely love it. I think the Grand Inquisitor is so creepy. We talked about deaths, and the Grand Inquisitor is in my honorable mentions as well. And when I think about lightsaber battles, this is this is up there. And so I have 2 in my top 10 from Rebels alone.
Mm-hmm.
Which is no small feat.
I love that the Grand Inquisitor is a Powin. That's a great example of the Star Wars creators just doing something because it's cool. Like Dave Filoni was just watching Revenge of the Sith and saw that Powin and that one scene. There was just a super cool
Yeah.
alien design, and he was like, "Yes, I like that. I'm gonna keep working with that."
Yep. It's his version of a Lobot.
I was recently watching a documentary about Chris Claremont, who is like the most famous X-Men author, and he's very well known for being very inclusive in a lot of his X-Men stories. And in the documentary, he was talking about how whenever there was a new character, one of the first questions he asked would be, "Why can't it be a girl?" And I feel like Star Wars does that sometimes with a lot of their characters where, yeah, there's just like a weird, like, why can't this be an alien? Like, is there any reason? And I like it when they do just make random people aliens every now and then.
Yes, I've talked at length before about that I think there should be even more of that. I want so many more aliens. But let us know what you think about your favorite lightsaber fights. As we mentioned, our exact lists got a little muddied when putting them together, so it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And we love all these fights, and we got to talk about all of them one way or another. So even if it may appear that the Battle of the Heroes, Obi-Wan and Anakin on Mustafar is Matt's 5th favorite. It is actually my favorite, and Max is I'm sure up there as well. But that doesn't matter. We got to talk about all of them, and it was a great time. Does anyone have any force for thought?
Yes, and Carl Urban was that cameo from The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh,
sick.
nice.
Going back to the intro joke that you talked about, Womp Rats being no bigger than 2 meters. First off, that is terrifying. That's 6 feet. I'm assuming Womp Rat is a type of rat. Could you imagine a 6-foot rat? That is horrifying.
Yeah.
And gives a lot of credence as to why somebody would just go around in a T-16 killing them. That makes a lot of sense if you're me. I don't know. A lot of people make that into kind of like a meme when Luke's like, oh, I used to bullseye Womp Rats, my T-16
they make it
back
sound,
home.
They like to meme it like he's shooting kittens.
Yeah, and no, these things are 6 feet tall. They're 6-foot rats. I mean, this guy's hunting
Yeah,
for
it's
all
like shooting
intents and
gators.
purposes. Yeah.
Or me. That's exactly my height. Or I think
Anyway.
I've grown a little bit, weirdly.
That's exciting.
I know.
Good,
You can
because
now say
I
you're taller
definitely
than a
have
Womp
not
Rat.
shrunk. I'd much prefer that.
All right. Thank you very much for listening. Follow us on all the socials. Let us know what you think about your favorite lightsaber battles. And until next time, thanks for stopping.
See you, Sammy.
We'll cut that. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for stopping.